Bibles in the Old Testament on pages 304 to 306. Then David slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. The time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David. Only he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." And Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart towards you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, although I am only a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in, and your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern this your great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, "Because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honors all your life. No other king shall compare with you. If you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." Here ends the reading of God's word.
Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Gracious and most wonderful God, I give you thanks for this story this morning. May these words from my mouth, may the meditation from all of our hearts be acceptable unto you. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I have to say this is one of my favorite stories from the Hebrew Scriptures. Here, Solomon has taken over as king after his father's death, and God comes to him and asks him, "Ask me anything and I'll give it to you." And Solomon asks for wisdom, asks for the ability to discern what is good and what is bad. And I think that's a great reminder for all of us. I don't know how many of you are exhausted or tired with the fullness of your lives. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm really busy." Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I hear that a lot. And how many of us cringe every time someone stands up during announcements and says, "Oh, we need help for the rummage sale," or "Oh, we need someone to sign up for fellowship hour," or "Oh, we need someone for this project or that project." You get my drift? How many of you avoid going to or joining maybe a service group because you don't know how you can fit one more thing into your lives? In the two organizations that I am working with right now, I'm active here at church and also in Kiwanis here in Alpine. And if you ask Ray, our president of Kiwanis, I think he'll agree, along with our moderator, there always seems to be a shortage of people signing up to help with projects. Am I right?
You're right.
Always a little short. There's never enough help to do all the things the organizations feel that their missions are called to do. But we've become a culture that tries to be as busy as possible. And we kind of become a culture where we think the busier I am, the more important I am. When a new member joins a church, it's been my experience in all the churches I've served, it's like, oh, a new member, we can get them on a committee or a board, and then I won't have to serve. We all spend our time searching for information and for knowledge. I mean, I ask my beautiful children at times, sometimes I have a little computer problem, and I say, how do I fix this computer problem? I don't know, Dad, Google it. That's what I'd have to do. So we're always searching for knowledge, but I think we forget to search for wisdom. And I think there's a difference between the two. We forget that people may be coming to church for rest, not necessarily to serve on another committee. And when the time is right, God will call them to serve on that committee at that time and in that place. We live in a culture and a life that doesn't encourage us to seek wisdom. In the midst of all we're trying to do, I think we try and control our lives instead of letting go and letting God. And I know that's a bit of a euphemism that we say, but if we really try to live that, I think we can begin to feel some transformation in our lives. If I have more knowledge, I believe, more information, I'll be able to control and work better at my job and all my volunteer activities. I'll have more time because if I get more knowledge on time management, I'll be able to work more at the house, at work, at school, sports, church, clubs, and at the end of every week, I'm exhausted. There's no time for God. No time for wisdom of this world to grow inside of us, because we may leave an hour on Sunday morning, but sometimes Sunday morning we're so tired from the week, this may be the only moment we can rest our eyes. The question for the church and for this shepherd is, how do we slow down? How do we know God better in the living of our lives? Many of you might have heard of the business guru Stephen Covey. He was in front of a bunch of type A students one day. He filled a gallon jar full of large rocks. And he asked, is this jar full? And of course, the type A student said, yes, it is. He said, really? He pulled a bucket of gravel out from underneath the desk and he poured the gravel in and it filled in between the rocks. And then Covey said, is this jar full? And he said, they were a little worried and they said, probably not. And he said, good. And he reached under the table and he pulled out a jar of sand and he filled the thing up with sand. He said, is this jar full now? And of course, they're all smiling and they say, no. And he takes out a pitcher of water and he fills the water up to the brim. And then, I think this is the most important part of that demonstration. You might have all heard of this, but Covey asked, what is the point of this illustration? And one student, excited student, said, no matter how full your schedule is, if you try really hard, you can always fit something else into it. Sound familiar? Covey says no. The point is that if you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never get them in the jar. If you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never put them in the jar. Is that not what Solomon is asking when God comes to him and says, what do you want? I'll give whatever you want. Solomon sees that as king, he needs to have wisdom to govern. He's a young man. He doesn't necessarily have the wisdom of life behind him. He wants the large rock of wisdom there first. The large rock of faith there first. What are we doing to fill our lives with love and grace? What are we doing to put our large rocks into our lives so that we can be connected to the values of who we are in this world in which we live? Sometimes I think it is getting more information and knowledge. If I can just learn a little bit more. But let me tell you, from the time I've graduated from college till now, the information has doubled at a rate of almost 2.5 or less than 2 times a year, every 2 years. More and more information is doubling as we learn more and more things out in this world. The older I get, the more I realize I'll never have all the knowledge of the world. I'm always going to be a little slow on the uptake on some things. There'll always be something new for me to learn and to listen to, and that's what I love about life, because there's always something new to learn. But how can I humble myself to take time to work towards that wisdom, take time to work towards that big rock in my life where God is the center of my life, so I can let the other things fill in around me? You see, I believe Solomon in this story has a lot to teach us in this time and place, to seek something a little different in our lives. You know, I talk to people that retire, and the first thing they say is, I've never been so busy in all my life. Well, retiring is a time for those big rocks to come in, to feed your spirit and your soul. You see, we need to see how Solomon humbled himself with God's question, and he sought out wisdom over knowledge and riches. How can we keep ourselves from working ourselves to burnout? We need to become that church that is a place for wisdom quests. Oh, I think that would be the coolest thing to say, oh, Alpine Community Church, United Church of Christ, that's where you can go and seek out wisdom in your life. If you come to this church, you can seek out wisdom. You can take that deep breath. You can get to know who God is, and God can be part of your life. And wisdom will be centered to who you are. I believed if we really study growing and thriving churches out in the world, you would find that they are wisdom quest places where people can grow in their spirit. There's opportunities for wisdom quests. Wisdom quests through worship, through Bible studies, through prayer circles, fellowship time, outreach mission to others. But first, let us not confuse wisdom with information and knowledge. Ariana Huffington, who burned herself out, writes, "But wisdom is found no more readily than it was 3,000 years ago in the court of King Solomon. In fact, ours is a generation bloated with information and starved for wisdom." I truly believe that. What's the difference between wisdom and information? Thank you, Webster. Wisdom is an ability to discern inequalities and relationships, insight and good sense, to have good judgment. Information is the communication or reception of knowledge or intelligence. Knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction, facts, and data. Both are important. But there's a part of me that would like to be really good at judgment and insight before I have all that knowledge. Because if I have good judgment and good insight, I'll be able to use the knowledge in good ways. April Yamasaki says, when Solomon finally turns to his request, asking God for an understanding mind to govern your people, ability to discern between good and evil. You see, Solomon asked for wisdom. This might be the wisest thing Solomon ever does. Have you ever thought of asking for wisdom to discern between good and evil in your life? The question becomes, how do we go about the wisdom quest? What books do I need to read? What activities will teach me how to fulfill that quest? You see what I just did there? I went on a wisdom quest and I flipped it to an information quest. What books do I need to read? What do I need to do? April also went on to say that in her own life she added a simple gratitude list to the end of her day. Just 5 people or 5 things, 5 thoughts, 5 experiences that I can offer back to God with thanks. She says that may not be a huge wisdom quest activity, but it is a beginning to let go and know that God is in the midst of our lives. God is the big rock in the center of our lives if we can find 5 things that we're grateful for every day. in a true wisdom quest, it's not seeking the right way to wisdom. It is looking for your personal wisdom quest. Now, this is kind of a funny story for my family, because a few years ago I went on the very first sabbatical I ever went on in my life. And part of that sabbatical was a 3-week silent retreat. Now, how many of you know me? I love to talk. I'm just a little bit of an extrovert. My family said I'll never do it. I'll never do it. 3 weeks, no television, no cell phone, no radio, no nothing but my journal and myself and the house that I was staying in. And what I began to realize is that after the 3rd or 4th day, I began to find my voice. I began to look at that person in the mirror, and I began to maybe start liking that person a little more than I did when I was so full of everything and so full mostly of how important I am in this world. I finally let go. I finally realized that, there's something special about silence and peace. You introverts know all about that. And I began to hear that still small voice of God come to me. It might be in the storm, because I was right on the Puget Sound at night when a storm came crashing in. It might be when I watched the beauty of a sunset. It might be when I just took time out during the day and actually watched seagulls in their social life. I didn't have anywhere to go, nowhere to be, nothing to listen to. I watched them for over an hour. What a gift. What a gift. On any wisdom quest, we have to begin, I believe, at looking in the mirror and saying, do I like that person that's looking back at me? That question may be, do I even know the person that's looking back at me? With those questions, we can begin to be in relationship with that person and with God, opening ourselves up, being able to take those big rocks of love and grace that come to us from God, put them inside our lives. And there were moments when I looked in that mirror and I said, I don't like that person. I remembered something I did, might have been 20 years ago. I don't like what I did. I'm not sure I like that person. But in the silence, I could hear God saying, I love you. Even though you did that, I love you. God has been with me throughout my life, I began to realize. In the good moments and even in my worst moments, God truly does love me. Am I willing to receive that love from God into my life? You see, too often people come to church always looking for the right answer, but I think sometimes it's in the questions that we truly find who God is. And it's in the questions that we can befriend that small child that's in each and every one of us. I don't know about you, but there are times in my life when I'll be walking down a busy street and I think I'm 5-year-old Kenny. And I got to get away out of all the big people that are around me. But I notice that people are moving away from me before I even have a chance to get out of the way. I'm a big guy. I bring a big presence when I walk down the street. I am not always that little Kenny, but little Kenny is inside me, just as the little you is inside you. And how do we feed that spirit so that love and the forgiveness that can only come from God can nurture us into a world where we are always on a wisdom quest? May we become a wisdom quest church. May we become a wisdom quest church with longtime members. May we become a wisdom quest church with strangers that come into our church for the very first time. And they find a place to search and to experience the love of God in our journeys and through our lives. May we look to find how to put the big rocks into our lives for our faith journey. May we do that with the grace that can only come through Jesus Christ. Amen. I want to close with a prayer that comes from the Navajo people. They call it